Hey, guys, what's up? Let me know, first of all, if you can see me and if you can hear me in the chat. So go ahead and type. Let me know if you guys can see me and hear me. It's going to get set up. Make sure that there are no technical difficulties before we get started. How's everyone doing? Nice to see some familiar faces from the Facebook community. We'll just give a couple of moments for people to stop in. Why don't you let me know what time it is for you right now? Because right now it's 1 p.m. right in the afternoon for me after lunch. What time is it for you guys? All right. Well, I'm going to get started because I want to be respectful of your time. Today it's just me. No Adrian, unfortunately, he's at a Halloween party for his kids, so that's okay. 1 a.m. Lim, thank you so much for joining. But I will try my best to manage the chat as well as teach you guys what I have to talk about on the screen today. And as you can see, I have now, I'm full screen, right? And I've done it so that I can transition to my desktop like this. So when I'm doing long extended periods of talking, you guys don't just see me in the little corner there. All right, so very quickly, I'm going to do a recap of what we've done so far with the Pomodoro Timer app. And then we're going to take a look at, I'm going to show you how I did the design, go through a little bit about how to use Sketch and how I did that. And then I'm going to go through a local notifications demo to show you how we can schedule notifications to show up for the user even if the app is off. And that's something that we're definitely going to need to do because the Pomodoro timer is going to run in the background even if the user doesn't have the app active. And I think all of that is probably going to take only about half an hour. And so whatever questions you guys have afterwards, off topic or on topic, I'd be happy to stick around and answer them for you. So that's kind of what we have in store. But before I go into the recap, I want to know what percentage of you guys, well, actually, the best way to do this is probably like comment in the chat if you do not know, if you haven't been following the how to make an app from scratch Pomodoro Timer app thing, because this is the third time that I've gone on Livestream to work on this Pomodoro Timer app. So if you have no idea what's going on and you're joining the stream for the first time, welcome. But please let me know so I know how much of a recap I have to do. Hey, I'm so happy to see you guys. Wow, all sorts of time zones in here. Thank you so much for joining. I'm super honored and super flattered that you guys are stopping by, honestly. Okay, well, it seems like you guys are caught up, so I won't go too much back in terms of a recap, but I do want to show you what the design is. So first of all, in the previous live stream, we did something like this, just a simple wireframe to show, where the elements are going to go, right? And to remind you guys, V1 will just be the 3 timers for Pomodoro technique, the work timer, the short break timer, and the long timer. And then the timer also needs to work in the background. So if the user exits the app, the timer's still running, and if the timer expires when the user is out of the app, we want to show a local notification. And that's something that I didn't tell you guys, I didn't think about before, but then I realized it and I needed to figure out how I was going to do that. Part of that local notifications demo, though, is I'm going to show you from the perspective of me doing it for the first time, because I'll be completely honest with you guys, and no matter if it's me or some other iOS guru you're following out there, no one knows everything. Even though it seems like I might know what I'm doing when I'm doing a video for you, there's a lot of like research and planning, and the iOS SDK is so big that no one knows everything. And so I think that's a very common misconception for beginners who are starting to learn. They feel like, oh, these gurus know everything. But the reality, the honest fact is that you only need to know enough of how to use Xcode, kind of Swift code, how the app, view controller's lifecycle. You need to have like a foundational base knowledge, and the rest really is reading in implementing documentation, because Apple has great documentation. You're going to be working with APIs and libraries which you've never worked with before. There's always new services, platforms coming out, but they always come with documentation. And so it's very important that you get used to reading documentation, interpreting it, trying it out, and there's a lot of figuring out. And so for this local notifications demo that we're going to jump into in today's live stream, I'm going to show you kind of like how from not knowing how to do it to having to implement it in the demo. So I think that will be an eye-opening experience for you if you are a beginner. All right, cool. So let's go into the design part first of all. So we did this timer wireframes just to do a quick recap for those of you guys who missed the last lesson, so you know what's going on. There's basically a timer in the middle. The start button I put near the bottom so that your thumb can reach it, and then this ring, it basically fills up as the timer nears the end of the timer. And you can swipe left and right for the other rings, because in the Pomodoro technique there are 3 different timers. So there's the short break one, or you could swipe to the other side. This is a wireframe of it running, so the play button turns into like a stop and pause button. And then when it reaches the end, there is a restart button. So I want to show you the simple design I came up with. It's not like groundbreaking or anything, but this is what I imagined, kind of like almost like the Apple glowing rings. So let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. So I want to show you how I created this inside Sketch. And even if you aren't using Sketch, if you're using Figma, I haven't touched Adobe XD before, so I'm not sure how close it is to that. But having worked with Figma and Sketch, they're very, very similar. But aside from like where buttons are or how to use Sketch or use Figma, the actual techniques in putting this design together, I think, will be invaluable nonetheless. So, so this is the design that I came up with. You can see part of the green ring and part of the blue ring here. These are the other 2 timers. So you can kind of swipe to the left or swipe to the right to get the other 2 timers. And this background is plain right now, but when we implement a couple more features like V2, I want to have some sort of animated moving background if you want. Like that could be maybe a paid upgrade, or it could be, you can have several options. We're also going to have some quotes, some inspirational or motivational quotes appear. And if you didn't know what this Pomodoro app is all about, we're going to be integrating social features into it. And so that's what makes this Pomodoro Timer app unique from the other ones out there in the market right now. And so I had to figure out, like, how am I going to I want the interface to be nice and clean, but how am I going to integrate like friends lists, searching for friends, social posts, and all of that stuff, and still have this like clean interface for when you're running a timer and you just want to stay focused on what you're working on, right? And so what I came up with was actually to have this Pomodoro timing screen as something which you can slide up, which reveals a bunch of tabs at the bottom. So then you can go through these different tabs when you're not running your timer, or even if you are running your timer, to check on like the settings, the friends, what your friends are doing, and stuff like that. Like all of the other stuff, we can leverage a tab bar. The reason why tab bars are so popular these days is because phones are getting longer. Well, at least the Apple iPhones are getting longer and longer. So you can see this is an iPhone X or XS, and it's like very long compared to this is an iPhone 8, or same size as an iPhone. Yeah, this is an iPhone 8 that I started the design in, and to compare, this is an iPhone 10. So you can see it's much longer, and so you have a lot more vertical real estate. So that's why tab bars are so popular these days, rather than having like a hamburger menu and having a slide out menu from the left hand side. I mean, you still see those, but if you only have like 5 tabs max, using a tab bar is a great option. Using the slide out menu, you can put a lot more stuff in it. So if you do have a lot more stuff, you might want to consider that instead. So that this is kind of like the simple design. I'm going to show you guys how I put this together, and I think it will be still very informative for you. So I'm going to use the wireframes here. Let me move this up a little bit. Maybe I can make this window a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. Now the one cool thing about Sketch is that you can kind of keep all of your documents inside this one Sketch document. You have this concept called pages. So this page where we have these wireframes, I can just name this page like wireframes. And then I can create a new page, and I can call this like V1 design, for example. And then it's empty right now. I'm going to start a new artboard. A new artboard is kind of like just a frame for your design. So choosing something like this. Now for the background, all I did was add a shape. You'll have these shapes in Figma as well. So I created a rectangle. And I use the shortcut key R. You could also go insert up here and choose shape. And you have all these different types of shapes. And usually, same thing in Figma, when you click on an object or an element, on the right hand side, you can find all of the configurable attributes and properties for it. So for example, for this guy, actually they changed, there it is. So recently I upgraded Sketch to the latest version, and they changed the UI a little bit. So all of the buttons placements, which I'm used to, they've kind of moved it around. So if you see me fumbling a little bit, that's kind of why. So I'm going to change this color, and you can pick a solid color, or you pick a gradient. So for example, I have a couple of preset gradients, but for this app, I chose something like of a dark blue. I'm not actually married to this. So here's the beginning color. I really like the rich dark blue, kind of like that. Let me just check on the chat. Is someone using a super chat? Sorry? Oh, sorry you guys. Oh, you guys have been not looking at my screen. Sorry about this. Let me change this right now. All right, so it looks like I have not mastered the use of my live stream software. So sorry about that, you guys. Right now you should be seeing my screen. You should be seeing Sketch. Luckily, we haven't gone too far into it yet, but this is what I have so far. So I apologize to you guys who are watching. Super, super sorry about that. All right, cool. So I'm super sorry about that, you guys. So basically what I did, started with an artboard, okay, and put a shape on it, put a gradient on it, and now we're going to create the design for it. Hey, did you guys even see the design then? Here, let me show you guys what I'm setting out to create. I don't even know if the screen was on at this time, if you guys were able to see this, probably not. But this is the simple design that I'm showing you how to recreate now. So it's got the timer, the other two timers on the left and right side. It's going to slide up to create a tab bar, to show a tab bar with all of the different sections. And that's basically it. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is put a circular shape. So we can go to shape, oval, and same thing, I think in all graphics apps they do this. If you hold down the shift button and you click and drag, you're going to create a perfect circle. But if you don't hold down shift, you're going to be able to create ovals. So I'm going to create an oval like that. I'll put it in the center. And I'm going to get rid of the fill. And instead, I'm going to use the border. So for this width, let's put something like 8. And it's arbitrary for me right now. I'm going to change this solid color to a gradient. So for this gradient, I'll show you something neat. So gradients usually go from one color to another color. You can also add kind of stops in between those two gradients, and you can kind of change them to other colors like this. But if you want to show progress, like in the beginning when I was first using these graphics programs, I could never understand what this angular gradient was used for. But now I kind of understand. It's to show progress. So you know, progress bars, sometimes they have like a dark color to a light color or a light to a dark color. For a circular progress ring like this would be the perfect opportunity to use this sort of angular gradient. So for example, I can use and change like maybe a dark pink to like a light pink. So you can play around with that. I'm not going to spend too much time fiddling around with this, but there's that. Next, we can insert like a piece of text. So you can go here. There it is. So that's my default font. It's way too big. And I'll use the San Francisco font, and we can customize the font if we'd like when we actually, oops. So we'll put that in the middle. We'll make it a little bigger. We can even choose a variation, so we can go light, which I think is what I ended up doing, or ultra light. I'm going to use display. So I can go for the ultra light there. And then for the icon, I use a service called Icons8, which has this desktop app, which gives me all of these different icons for me I can use in my app. It's not a free, actually you can use it for free, but I think there are certain limitations on the sizes that you get. So for what I have right now, I'm paying I think $99 a year for access to all of their icons at whatever sizes that I'd like, and I think it's totally worth it because aside from using it for apps, I also use it for my thumbnails and websites and stuff like that. So I can drag a play icon like that on the screen, and then you can actually further customize it. So I can change the color because it's an SVG, so I can enlarge it a little bit or shrink it or do whatever like that. So for the glow for this ring, what I ended up doing was, you can see here on the left hand side, I have the oval selected and I just duplicated it, and I can call this layer the glow. And for this one, I gave it a blur effect. So you can see I can blur it a lot more. So it's actually like two rings. The first ring that's sitting on top is the solid ring with the lines, the rigid lines, but then the ring behind it, I'm setting it to like a blurry version of it, so it almost gives off a glow. So that's how you're going to achieve that. And one thing I will mention now is that, you know, this is the design, but when it comes to implementing this design into your Xcode project, you're not going to be turning everything into graphic assets, because a lot actually can be accomplished through code, just programming. So for example, these labels, right? We can use a UI label, we can set a custom font to it, set the size, and even gradients. You don't need an image, so you can do gradients in the code. For me personally, I have to figure out how I'm going to be drawing these circular progress rings, but I know you can do it, so I'm not going to be exporting those as images. And the glows, again, you can do those through code. So it's faster, and so you want to do as much with code as you can instead of images. So the next thing I'm going to do is basically group my two rings together like that, and you can do groups in Figma as well. I'm just going to call this a ring, and I am going to duplicate this ring, and then I can drag it to the left, and then I can duplicate another ring and I can drag it to the right. And let me just check the messages just to see nothing's going wrong. Oh, Nikhil, are you making a wireframe? So sorry guys, with that technical difficulty in the beginning, you guys might have missed it, but I did create a set of wireframes for it. It is in the same document. There we go. So this is what we did in the last live stream together. So this is now kind of like the design composites off of the wireframes. So for this, let's say this oval one, I can just pick a different color, a different glow color. For this ring, can do the same thing. So I'm just changing the colors on those guys. And that's basically how I created this design. It's going to be very simple for this V1 version. I'm just focusing on getting it launched and getting it to be a working Pomodoro timer. Yeah, that's basically it. Using Figma will be pretty much the same thing, and it's free. So I would use that first personally, but I already have a Sketch license, and I got used to using Sketch before Figma came out, and so that's why I'm using this personally right now. So let me save that. That's gonna be the basic design for the app. And next up, we're going to talk about the local notifications. That's it. Let me just show you what we have done in the previous live stream. Let me launch this app. In the last live stream, I showed you guys how to have a timer run in the background. And it's not what you think. It's not like you need to set some background task and have the timer actually running in the background. It's actually setting an end date. And when you come back into the app, it's checking your current date versus the end date. And we're doing some calculations to figure out how we should continue that timer or if the timer is actually done. So this is what we created in the previous lesson or the previous live stream. So it's just a timer like that, 7. And even if you leave it, you come back, it's at 2 now, right? So we didn't program for that. It keeps going down. But what I want to show you guys today is if the timer is running like this, and I mean, if we're in the app and it runs out, we can notify the user and play a sound. Hey, your timer is done. Your Pomodoro is done. So move on to your next task or start another Pomodoro or go to your break. But what happens if the user launches it and then they leave the app and they go do something else and then the timer runs out, right? We still want to notify them that the Pomodoro is up. And so what we have to do instead is we have to schedule a local notification to fire. It's like a push notification, except it's scheduled locally by your app. When the user starts the timer, we have to schedule that notification. So that is what I set out to do, and that's what I'm going to show you now. I didn't know how to do it to begin with, but I knew something like that existed and it could be done. So I started off by typing in UI local notification because I knew that this was what the class was called. Never worked with it. The first result is Apple documentation, right? So that's great. That's what you want. But then I noticed that this whole class is actually deprecated, which, if you're not familiar with the term, means that Apple retired that class, and they will or may stop supporting this in future releases. And this was deprecated in iOS 10. So that tells you how often I use this, right? And I didn't even know. So the thing is, they didn't tell me what class it was replaced with, because usually when they deprecate something, they roll that functionality into another class, or they just change the name, or they created an entirely new class. They didn't tell me right here what it was replaced with. So I actually had just to go back to the Google results, and I noticed that there was a Stack Overflow, and usually that comes with some discussion. So this guy told me that it is now rolled into the user notifications framework. And so that gave me kind of my next thing to figure out. Okay, it's called user notifications. So just grab that, and you go back to Google, type it in, and you can see some tutorials at the so that's great. Or if once you become familiar with reading documentation and interpreting it, it's actually faster just to go into the documentation and look at the classes. And Apple documentation is pretty good now, because not only it used to just be a listing of like methods in that class and maybe the protocols and all that stuff, but these days it's pretty in-depth. It's almost like a tutorial. So going through this documentation, and you go to topics, I noticed that there is a tutorial or a little section on asking permission to use notifications. And I noticed this myself. When you're using apps, they always pop up a little window and asks you, can this app play notifications for you? And so this piece is going to be something that we'll need. But I continue to scroll down: notification management, remote notifications requests, and then here, scheduling a notification locally from your app. This is exactly what I want to do. So I go ahead and click this, and I read all of this stuff, and basically what I did was, just to try things out, I copied the sample code that they have right here. So that's what I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. Right, so configuring the notification content. So I copied all of this, right? Let's say, and I just, as a test, right, I just put it in the view did load, because I want to see if this works. Configure local notification. Specify the conditions for delivery. So you can either trigger it from a calendar or a time interval or a location. So that's kind of cool, right? I don't know if you use any grocery apps with loyalty cards, but if you do, like I have one called Longo's, and whenever I'm close to a Longo's and I'm driving by it, it always gives me a notification and pops up my loyalty card and tells me like, oh, you might be going to Longo's, right? So here's your loyalty card. So that's probably what it's doing there, which is pretty cool. But what we're going to do is use the calendar notification, because we have a date and a time which that timer expires, right? And so we want to trigger it based on that end date. I'm just checking the chat really quickly. Thank you, Marcus, for letting people know that we have a Facebook community, so you can go there and ask questions and get help on your iOS journey, and lots of helpful people in there. All right, so the next part is we're going to configure the date. Now this is to configure a recurring date, and I don't necessarily want to do that. So this here is creating a date components class. All right, so I know I need a date component object, because that is what gets passed into this UN calendar notification trigger. So if you take if you were following in the last stream, you know that what we do is when the user starts the timer, so here in this method, we schedule a timer based on however minutes it is, so 25 minutes, and then we set an end date. Now this end date is just a date object. So now in my head, I know I need to convert this date object into a date components object so that I can pass that into this UN calendar trigger, right? And for repeats, I would just put false, because my timer is not going to continually repeat. So I copy this chunk of code, and I just put it here. And here it starts saying like, oh, it doesn't know what this class is. So what you have to do if you're using this is just import the user notifications framework so that it recognizes all of these classes, right? All right, so it's complaining about date components because I actually don't have any date components right now. So we're going to have to do change a date into date component. So we'll figure that out in a second. But first, we're going to continue with the next task. So here it's creating a request based on a UUID, and this is going to be the identifier for that scheduled notification, so that in the future, if you keep track of this UUID, you can cancel it, right? Just in case you need to like modify it or cancel it or whatever, this UUID string is, this identifier is how you're going to get a reference to it. And then you also pass in the content, which is this guy right here, so the meat of the actual notification. And then the trigger, which contains the date it's supposed to trigger at and whether or not it repeats. So that all of that comes together into a notification request, and then you pass that request into the user notification center. And that's how that all gets scheduled. So we're going to copy this chunk of code, and we are going to put it down here. So let's configure some of this stuff that we need. So first of all, back here in the trigger, repeats is false because we don't want it to repeat. Date components, let's create a variable for date component. So let's say we have an end date first. So our end date, actually we have a property. So I'm going to say end date is equal to the current date and time, and we're going to add like 10 seconds to it. And then in order to convert it to date components, I had to look this up too. Let me see if I can remember it right now because I kind of don't remember it. So let date components equal date components dot, I don't remember it. So all you need to do is just Google it. Date components to date. Or sorry, it's the other way around. Date to date components Swift. And yeah, you can see that this is the post that I saw right here. And by scanning the code, you can see that all you need to do is this calendar, the calendar class, get the current calendar, and then use this date components method, specify which components you want, and then pass in the date that you want to convert to the date components. All right, so that's what we're going to do. Calendar.current.date components, and we pass in the components that we want as a set. And so we'll do year, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds. And then the date which we want to pass in is this end date. All right, so now we have a set of date components from our date object. And let's see what this error is complaining about. Oops. I'm going to force unwrap it because why would this not be able to get a current date? Oh, you know what? End date is an optional. We declared it up as an optional up here. I forgot. So that's why we have to unwrap it down here. All right, so now we have our date components. We're going to pass that into the notification trigger. And then we create the request off of the content and the trigger. So let's change the content a little bit. Pomodoro app. Your Pomodoro is up. And then we are going to just schedule it. So then I tried this first, and I'm going to save you from the trouble. I tried this first and it wasn't working. And that's when I remembered going back here to the documentation that I needed to ask the user permission first to show them notifications. And so I click this, and this is what we're after. We want to show this little pop-up to allow the user to choose yes or no. Request authorization at launch time. So I just basically copied this piece of code and I put it here. And then I was able to pop up that little window to let the user say allow or not allow. I'm going to move this piece of code to schedule the notification. I'm going to move it to actually when the user hits start on the timer, because it shouldn't actually run until here. So when the user starts the timer, that's when we're going to configure the notification. We don't have to set an end date because it was set up here. And then we get the date components, we create the trigger, we create the request, and then we schedule it. So let's try it if it works. So here, my main point is just to show you guys kind of like how to read documentation, and like even for someone like me who has been working with Swift and building apps and stuff, you know, I don't know everything, and this is how easy it is to find out how to do something. So again, all you need is that kind of base foundation for Xcode and Swift, and to understand how iOS works, and everything else you can research and you can figure out. There's no way you'll be able to explore all of the iOS SDK. And don't feel like you need to memorize and know everything, because you really don't. So I'm going to click allow here, and I'm going to click start, and I'm going to exit the app. And then we'll wait maybe 5 more seconds, and we should see that notification pop up there. See, there it goes. So that's pretty cool, right? Let me check the chat really quickly. Hey, Adrian, nice to see you, man. Glad you can join. How was the Halloween party? Adrian's kids are the cutest. So my kids actually had a Halloween party too at school, but I didn't have to go. So this is how, you know, my point again is to show you guys how easy it is to read documentation and kind of give you a demo of that. This is still demo code. Like, this is not how the real live app is going to be. But if you guys have been following on this Pomodoro Timer app, I'm treating this app seriously. So it's not just a demo for you guys or for the channel. I'm actually publishing this. I'm going to create a website behind it. I'm going to promote it, put a marketing plan together for this app. And we're going to try to get a user base on it and try to hopefully in the future monetize it a little bit. And, you know, I'm glad you guys are here on the ground. So you can see kind of like how this all started. So I have really high hopes for this app. Now, I will be creating like the basic V1 version that you see here as a tutorial series on my channel. All right, so I am leveraging it as a tutorial series as well. But personally, I'm also personally invested in seeing this app succeed. So that's kind of what I want to do. Oh, and actually this design looks a little bit different from this one. I forgot to put that sort of semi-transparent circle right there, but that's all I did was for the ring right here, for the oval, instead of specifying no fill, I did give it a fill. So I just chose something like that, whatever color it was, and then I set the opacity to like semi-transparent. So that's what I did there. All right, so that's all of the content I had for you guys today. That's all I wanted to show you guys today. I'm going to jump into the chat now, see if you guys have any questions, or if you do, type them in the chat right now. I'm going to answer your questions. Joan, if you don't have a Mac but you have an iPad, you can start learning. So on the iPad, Apple has a Playgrounds app. It's really, really good. Oh, you know what? Let me transition to this part. Yeah, so that Playgrounds app for iPad is really, really good. it teaches you how to use Xcode, how to use Swift mostly though. So you can start learning, but eventually you will need a Mac to develop. If you want to use like the official Apple tools and you want to develop natively for the iOS, you will need a Mac. And there are several options. You could buy a used Mac, even a Mac Mini will do. You can use a remote service like Mac in Cloud or Mac Stadium or something that allows you to remotely log into a Mac with a PC, like a Windows desktop, and then you can use it through that. Or you can virtualize it on your PC, but we're starting to get a little technical if you're not. We actually have an article on our website. You can just maybe you can reach out and I can send you the link to that, but it gives you several options for PC users to create iOS apps. Shane, do you do this as a career, coding, Shane? Yeah, so I started off as a software consultant building apps for other clients, and I was part of a company. I was basically an employee, and then I discovered my passion for teaching, and there was an audience. A lot of you guys out there want to learn how to make apps, and so I honestly found it a lot more fulfilling than building apps for clients. And so I think in the process of a year, now this has become my full-time job, and I'm basically, my income comes from you guys supporting Code with Chris through the courses and through YouTube. So thank you so much, because I wouldn't be here without you guys. Let's see. Yeah, fellow rocks, you should put your chat next to your working monitor so you can see both. So I was thinking of doing a dual monitor setup, so I can put the chat. Right now I have my laptop, which is, I'm seeing myself live streaming as well. Or you can get kind of fancy and you can have a sort of frame and have your chat, but as you can see, you guys were watching my face when I thought you guys could see the screen, so I need to figure that software out first. But I think I'm gonna go dual monitor. All right. So Iona's asking, can you connect this design in Xcode? Yeah, you can. So there's actually, you can either, so there are a couple of different options. So the first option is you need to try to replicate as much as possible through code rather than relying on exporting image graphics and then putting it into Xcode. Barring that, your next step is to take what elements that cannot be created programmatically, and you can use images, right, to style your elements. Another cool thing which I showed in, I think, my very first lesson is Figma. Actually, if you select an element in Figma, it tells you the Swift code to generate that element. And I don't know how perfect it is because I haven't used it extensively, but I just wanted to let you know that it's there. And there's also something else which I talked to my ex-coworkers who are still working at the consulting company, and they tell me that they use something called 𝗧𝗶𝗺 now, which kind of bridges the gap between the development team and the design team. Oh, you guys can't see my screen again. I'm sorry. Just getting used to this live streaming thing. Thanks so much for bearing with me. So 𝗧𝗶𝗺, this thing is supposed to bridge the gap between development teams and designer teams. And I have never used it before. I'm interested in taking a look at what kind of like how to use it. But what my guess is that, so like selecting an element gives you the code. Yeah, it looks like it gives you the code for it. And the cool thing is that you can upload your sketch designs and your Figma designs straight into 𝗧𝗶𝗺, and then it looks like developers and designers can also comment on the design. Yeah, so it's worth exploring, I think. So this is another way which you can use, another tool to use to implement your design into Xcode. But I think the main thing is to basically use code to style your elements, and then whatever else you can't style to use images. Glenn, V2 was actually a ton of features. So let me show you what that is. So this basic Pomodoro app is just like V1 is just the timers, right? But we have all of these features that I have planned for this app to make it the app that I think is missing out there in the marketplace today. And that is the ability to add friends and challenge each other, motivate each other to basically complete Pomodoros. So for the productivity focused people, it adds a social element to it, because I think traditionally this Pomodoro technique is a very individual thing. You want yourself to be focused and complete work and stuff. But I got this idea from someone else where they challenge each other. Like there were two friends both using the Pomodoro technique, and they would share how many Pomodoros they finished that day, and it would motivate them. They motivate each other to do more and to be more productive and to stay focused. And so that I'm just translating that into an app, which doesn't exist right now. All of the apps out there in the marketplace, they're Pomodoro timers with built-in maybe to-do lists or like habit trackers or stuff like that, but no social elements to it. So that's the idea behind this whole project. But V1 is just a simple bare bones Pomodoro timer, which most people, which is even below what's out there today. So I don't see why people would use my V1 versus a more full-featured app, but I need to get it out there to motivate myself to keep going, because I know that if I spend too much time on a project without getting some feedback and sending it out there and seeing some progress, then I lose motivation and I'm not going to get to all of this other cool stuff that's planned for the app. So I need to get V1 out there in the App Store, even if no one's going to use it. But once we get like V2 or V3, and we start getting people's feedback and we start implementing some of these features which don't exist out there right now, that's when I see the app gaining some more traction. So that's kind of the plan right there. Yeah, Carl. So Adobe XD, I think, is, even if you don't have Creative Cloud, now I don't know if you know this, but Adobe XD is free, actually. They made it free maybe to try to get more adoption for the program. So I've heard some good things about it. If you search up Adobe XD on YouTube, there will be some tutorials for it. I've seen that. Unfortunately, I don't know how similar it is to Sketch, but if I had to guess, I would say it's pretty similar. Yeah, so Glenn, exactly. Yeah, XD is free. Iona, so a lot of this design that you see here on the screen, I think I can do through code. So once I get to that point where I'm implementing the design in code, like for sure this gradient background I can do through code. The custom label I can do through code, like these gradients I can do through semi-transparency I can do through code, the glow I can do through code, the progress ring filling up I can do through code. So like I think pretty much I can do most of it through code. This button, the simple shape, you might even be able to do through code. Yeah. At this point right now, for this kind of like simple design, I think a lot of this can be done via code. Once we get into like moving backgrounds and all that stuff, maybe then it won't be as much. Any more questions, guys? Fergan asks, can we create this app using React Native or any other cross-platform tool? Let me just change this back. So my answer to you is probably yes, to be honest. I haven't used React Native, so I can't tell you definitely yes or no, but this app is pretty simple. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that. It's just a different discipline. It's like a different set of tools, right? It's a different language. Yeah, like I don't see why not. And if your follow-up question is like, why wouldn't I use React Native to create this app? And the only reason for that is because what I've learned in the past and what got me to this point was just Objective-C, Swift, and Xcode and stuff. So that's what I know, and that's what kind of like my comfort zone, I guess you would say. So that's why I'm building this for iOS using Xcode and Swift. But if you were just getting into mobile app development, I don't see why you wouldn't explore React Native first. And it's something that I've wanted to look into myself. It's just time is always a constraint, right? But that's my reasoning. Glenn, will the code be on GitHub? It will be available to the public. I don't know if it will be GitHub or any other format, but yes, the code will be available. Maybe not the full feature set, right? Because at some point, if I'm going to be, trying to turn this into a viable business and trying to make some money off of it, at that point, it doesn't make sense for me to just put the whole source code for the entire app out there, right? So I think I will be, I'll show you guys how to build this V1 for sure, and V2 maybe with some social features and all that stuff, but I have to cut it off at some point in terms of the code base. But I will continue to share with you guys my learnings and the progress of how the app is doing in the App Store, how I'm planning features, kind of the setbacks that I'm going to experience with it, all that stuff, right? I'm going to be transparent about that. Carl, what assets can you import from Sketch into Xcode? So in Sketch, mainly you'll be exporting these elements. So you're going to have to see, right? In Sketch and in Figma, I'm not sure about Adobe XD, but there's going to be some way for you to export some of these elements out as graphics or as PDF or something like that. So you can see, oh, you can't see the screen, sorry. Right here, I've got the circle selected. And in Sketch, you can choose a image format to export it in. So PNG, JPEG, PDF, or whatever. And the sizes, and you would basically export them and import them into the asset library of Xcode. And then you'll be able to select those images when, let's say, you're styling an image view or a button or something like that. You'll have access to those assets in the asset library. The danger is to try to make everything an image asset and just do it that way. It's going to work for you, but it's just not as optimized for performance as it could be. So maybe as a beginner, if you're just trying to get it out the door and trying to get it done, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing, because I know for beginners, from my experience teaching people, the most important thing is not like how perfect your code is, how, what's the right way, what's the wrong way, and getting caught up with all of that. It really is, it's a mentality, it's a motivation, it's a mental game, really, because so many people give up, right? And so I want to see as many people succeed as possible. So I always say there is a better way, but I'm not going to say that's the only way, right? So as a beginner, I would put more importance on gaining more experience, building more apps, making more mistakes, kind of, getting those notches on your belt is more important than trying to write like the perfect code, trying to design the perfect app, trying to do everything the right way, because you can get so caught up in that it gets discouraging, to be honest. Honestly, as a beginner, you're just gonna feel like, wow, this is so tedious, this is so hard, so convoluted to try to make this, super optimized, and You're not going to have fun. You have to be having fun with it if you're going to stick with it. And then when you get like really serious about it and you're going to start applying for jobs and I don't know, start building like a big app to try and make money or whatever, then you can start learning about how to optimize your code for performance and how to do things like follow best practices and stuff. And it's not too late. It's not too late. It's not like golf. I feel like when I was learning golf, it was imperative that you kind of train your muscles and your movements right from the beginning, so you don't kind of develop these bad habits that become really hard to correct. But for coding, you can develop bad habits, but it's not like you cannot correct it because it's not muscle memory, right? You just have to remember, oh, I should be doing it this way. I shouldn't be doing it that way. All right, let's check out what other questions you guys have. Iona, so why do this with another tool if it can be implemented directly through code? So as an individual developer, yeah, you're free to just start like just implementing a design in Xcode. But if you're following kind of like a traditional app development process, and maybe this just applies because I was working with clients, right? You have to show them what they're going to get before you go and work on it. And so doing the wireframes, right, showed them where all of the elements was going to be, how the user would interact with the screens and how many screens there were, where the pop-ups were and all of that stuff. And they would basically sign off on that and say, yes, this looks good to us, before we proceeded to this step, which is styling everything and adding color and emotion to the app, showing how some of the animations might work. And then they sign off on that. And then you start developing it. So I guess maybe in a way it was to protect the company, right? But as an individual developer, I feel like it's still a good idea to do this because it gives you like a roadmap for when you go down the development path. Because if you're trying to design things as you're developing it, there will be a lot of back and forth, like a lot of backtracking, and that can lead to a lot of code like bloat, and you might leave pieces of code that you don't use anymore in your project. So it's almost like having doing these graphic comps in a graphics program gives you a roadmap to do your development. Aiden, so thank you. Thank you about the compliment for the design. I really wanted to make it minimal so you can focus, like it's clean, so it's not cluttered, so you can focus on your work. Yes, the background is going to run in the background. That's what we did in the previous live stream. So you'll find it on my channel in part 2. I showed you guys how to keep a timer, like how we're going to keep the time even if the user is out of the app. And in this live stream, I showed you guys how to notify that the timer is up even if the user is not in the app. So yeah. Timothy, unfortunately, I don't know too much about 𝗂𝗶𝗺, but I know there are a lot of tutorials, good tutorials out there. Yeah, Glenn, so you meant V1 before. Yeah, the V1 code will be out there. I don't know if it will be on. Maybe I should start using GitHub. Traditionally, I just like zipped it up and sent it to people, but what do you use for icon creation for the various sizes? Glenn, I actually have a video on that in my channel, so just go over to my channel page, click on the videos, and then it's maybe like 4 or 5 videos down. It was pretty recent, so you can check that out. Any more questions, you guys? We've got a couple more minutes left. So again, I want to thank you guys all for joining and helping me feel so comfortable on the live stream, just hanging out with you guys. So actually, let me know. I want to give you guys a question. So in these live streams, you guys are seeing me like build stuff, show you guys code and all that stuff. But I'm also thinking about having a like jam session. You know how our name is Code with Chris? And so this live stream will basically be me, like us just coding together. So I'm coding my thing. You can see my screen. I'll have headphones on and I'll be coding. We can have a chat going and you can code, you can learn or code your own thing, right? It's basically just a jam session, a code jam session, where as if we were all working like at a table. And I won't really be focusing on teaching. Rather, I'll be focusing on building stuff, like maybe building demos for future tutorials or building apps that I would like to build. Just me learning through different tutorials because I'm constantly learning as well. But just like hanging out, chatting, casual. So I can do a lot more of those because I don't have to prepare anything for it. So let me know if that's something that you would want to join, and just you know when it's going to be each week, and it's just a time which you're going to set aside so that you can learn some coding or do some coding, and we can do that together. Let me know. Glenn, I missed your question. What is your view on splash screens with an app? So my view, I actually subscribe to the Apple view of what to do with splash screens, which is, or otherwise known as launch screens. And if you go into their human interface guidelines, they have some guidance on what to do with launch screens. And that is not to show your logo, not to show like loading bars or whatever. I know games are notorious for doing this sort of stuff, but for in terms of apps, their guidance is basically to show your home screen, like a bare version of your home screen, so that it gives the illusion that when people tap on your app icon, your app launches really, really fast, because that launch screen, if it looks like your home screen and then it transitions into your actual home screen with the data coming in, it feels like your app was like really quick and speedy. And I think when apps launch really slow, people tend to not want to use them as much. So that's the guidance that Apple gives, and that's what I think. Like, I agree with that. All right, thanks for giving me some validation on my code jam idea. So you guys can actually be coding with Chris. And I know for a lot of people, they can't find time. They want to learn how to code, they want to learn Swift and Xcode, but they just can't find time in their schedule to do it. But for a lot of people, it's an issue of prioritizing it. I think if it's something that's high on your priority list to do, then you're going to make some time and prioritize it. And so that's what my code jam idea is kind of revolving around, that helping people have a time in their calendar, they can set it there, that for that 1 hour, they're going to be sitting down with me and we're going to be coding together. I'm going to be doing my thing, you're going to be doing your thing, and we can chat through chat if something, if you basically having some coding buddies. Do you think it's possible to make an app successful coding it only for Apple OS and Android? I think those are the two major platforms, but my point of view is that the app is the app, but really what is going to make your app successful is really the business plan and the marketing plan behind the app. Because I think it's pretty hard to like protect your app idea. Like once your app launches and it's like one of a kind, you're the first one there, unique idea, there's going to be clones. There's going to be people who will create other versions of it. So you need to leverage that first mover advantage and have a solid business plan and marketing plan so that you take that lead and turn it so big that other competitors can't catch up with you. Is it difficult? Yeah, exactly like 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀. Is it difficult to write code out of your own mind, or is this normal for a beginner? Yeah, it's completely normal. So if you ask me, this is what the progression should be. So as a beginner, you should start doing, so I have a 28-day coding plan for beginners. And I have that on my channel, so you can actually follow those videos. And that is the exact order of lessons, of concepts taught and lessons to learn that I take all of my paying students through. Right, so after you get to that point and you get that foundational layer, I was talking about this the whole live stream, after you have that base foundational knowledge, you're not going to know every single thing under the iOS SDK. You're not going to know how to do anything, but no one knows how to do everything, right? This is the beauty of it. Once you have that foundational knowledge, the next step is to build as many of these like demo type of apps as possible. And you know, there's a lot of content creators out there issuing tutorials on how to build different apps. Try to consume as many of it as possible, because you're going to get exposed to different architectures, new classes, new how to do different features and stuff like that. And you're going to take all of that experience, and when it comes time to build your own app and you're coming up with something from scratch, you're going to remember all of those demo apps that you've built, and you're going to be able to think in your head, hey, I did something similar to what I want to do now back then. So let me pull that up, take a look at it, and you can adapt it, and you can, you know, grow from there, or stand on the shoulders of giants. If you have no pool of experience to draw from, it's really, really hard for you to come up with something out of thin air, right? So just to reiterate, have a plan, like a lesson plan, if you're starting out from scratch, so that you at least get some of the foundation stuff in, and then build as many like small demos as you can to get more, to build up a pool of experience, and then you can go and tackle your own app. And because at that point you have this whole pool of experience to draw from. All right, so we're a little short on time. Where can I find lessons to make a social media app? Phantom, I would challenge you to define social media app a little bit more, because a lot of people say they want to make social media apps, and I have no idea what that means. Like, do you want to create the next Facebook or what? But social media apps, like if you're talking about a social network, you want to create an app like a whole social network, your own social network, you need to start from the fundamental stuff. And you can find that if you go on my channel page and just hit the I think it's called like how to make apps beginner series or something like that. So check that out. It's the war card game tutorial. There's actually a couple more modules after that, which is also available in my channel. So go through all of that, get that base foundational knowledge in, and there are some free tutorials out there to implement social features for apps. And at that point, you'll be ready to tackle that. But at this point, what I would challenge you to do is just define what a social media app means to you very, very well, so you kind of know what you set out to do. The more vague your idea is, the more likely it is to fail, because you don't know what you want, right? But if you can define exactly what you want down to like the screens and stuff like that, you kind of have a plan. So anyways, happy Halloween, guys. I'm so happy to see all of you here. Same time next week, and we'll do another live stream. And at that point, I think I will actually have most of this app done, and I'm going to release them as videos. And so in the next live stream, I might talk about something else that revolves around this app. And then hopefully in the middle of November or something, we'll submit this app to the App Store, V1. All right, we'll do that together. So thank you so much for joining, guys, again, and have a happy Halloween and a great rest of the week. See you guys later.